Hello, and welcome to episode 8 of Big Ideas in Cannabis on the Beard Bros Media Network. I'm Cassie Tomaselli, your host. I'm the founder of Tomaselli Media, a boutique content marketing agency focused on thought leadership and personal brand building in the cannabis industry. And today I'm so excited to introduce my next guest, who is Kristina Lopez, the CEO of House of Puff, a brand I have just admired for such a long time and can't wait to get into. So Kristina, thank you so much for taking the time and for being here today.
Thanks, Cassie. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of set the stage for everybody, could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're located, how you launched the company, all that good stuff?
Yeah. I am located in Connecticut, but the House of Puff offices are in New York City. And I grew up in a very strict Puerto Rican household. So cannabis was definitely off limits for me. I didn't consume in high school, didn't consume in college. It was only until I moved to New York and I was having trouble sleeping and doing my research. My mom's a physician, and I kept hearing everybody say, cannabis is good for sleep. And I'm like, really? And so when I went to go consume for the first time, I was running an art magazine. And when I went to do that, I was like, this is amazing. I felt like a whole new person. I felt like myself. And because of my background in art and storytelling and community building, House of Puff was born out of a desire for me. I went and, wanted to find beautiful accessories, pipes, rolling trays, and nothing that spoke to me in the sort of life that I was living. And I wanted to, sell my art magazine and get into cannabis. This is like 2017, 2018 when I really started to think about it. And I wanted to create a brand that felt intentional, that felt elevated, as a luxury beauty or a fashion label, right? Something that women could see themselves doing. And I didn't see myself in the existing market. So I wanted to create a space where cannabis could coexist with culture, elegance, and education. And so I was pregnant with my twin girls at the time. I decided, all right, I'm going to buy the domain. I'm going to do all these things. And then
Wow.
I found my co-founder, Holly, who I had worked with at the art magazine. And I said to her, I want to do this with you. And so in 2019, right before the pandemic, of course, we decided to launch House of Puff. And it's been a wild ride ever since.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really started on the accessory side. So can you just tell me a little bit about the mindset that went into the beautiful accessories that you have?
Yeah. So because of my and Holly's art background, we knew from the beginning that we wanted to work with artists. So every product that we produce starts in the artist studio. So you're never going to find products that we're getting from somewhere else and just slapping our logo on it. Everything is still designed till this day with artists in mind. For example, our rolling papers, we actually license artwork from artists. And every time we sell a pack of rolling papers, we give back to them and a nonprofit of their choice. And we've launched 4 of them, I believe. But starting with accessories really gave us the freedom to lead with design. And it was, very little regulatory constraints, right? So it positioned us not just as a cannabis brand, but a lifestyle brand. And all of our pieces are functional. So they're, meant obviously to use if you're consuming cannabis, but also meant to sit proudly on your coffee table and to look like a piece of art. So that helps shift the perception of cannabis away from something that you're supposed to hide or, something that's stigmatized, towards something that you can integrate into your daily rituals, that's beautiful, intentional, and worthy of display.
Um, One thing that you've done really well with House of Puff is something very similar that other women-led brands have done in this space, like Miss Grass, for example, is build a brand first before launching into THC and plant products. What was kind of the impetus behind that?
Yeah, so Miss Grass, I'm a fan of Kate and what she's built. They were actually one of the first back in the day when they had their marketplace, one of the first people to support House of Puff. And I think we came from the perspective of education being at our core mission, very similar to what Miss Grass has done, and building the community first. So when the pandemic hit, for example, a lot of the dispensaries or boutiques that were carrying our accessories closed. And so we sort of had to reshift our focus and meet people where they were, and they were at home. And I remember going on YouTube and typing in how to roll a joint, because till this day, I will fully admit I'm still not the best joint roller. But when I went to go do that, a lot of it were, very male centric, focused, in their mom's basement. And I was like, if we're going to like move the needle on this and have this open dialogue, especially when it comes to women and women of color, we need to make cannabis feel less intimidating. So we launched our YouTube channel. And our first video, how to roll a joint, hit like 1 million views immediately. So, whether it was through how-tos or, showing our product, we started to realize that our audience started to resonate with our brand, and the content that we're putting out that felt warm, real, and empowering, and not preachy. And so the goal really was to make people feel like they belong in the cannabis space, no matter where they're starting from. And from there, of course, we learned the ins and outs of not only our accessories, but what the legal landscape looked like. And, THC, the cannabis landscape as it stands is still very murky and confusing. So in the early years, we definitely focused on not only building a brand, but building a platform where we could empower and educate others.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to talk to you about too, because I noticed in your earlier years how you were creating those YouTube videos that you're still creating today that teach people everything from like the difference between like THC to CBD to like how to make pot brownies at home and everything in between. And it's all with you as the founder. And again, you're like you mentioned, it's very warm, it's very approachable. It's not preachy at all. Tell me about the decision to kind of move into that and like the production behind the videos and all of that stuff.
The production of the videos will crack
very well
you
done.
because a lot of them, especially in the beginning, were filmed on our iPhones, because we did not have a budget to hire, a fancy videographer. So one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a business advisor of mine was just start. Just whether it's on your iPhone, whether it's on like, a crappy camera, just start. And so Holly and I would sit there and, we're big data nerds, and figuring out what were people Googling, what were people watching videos about, and how could we redo it in a way that felt elegant, classy, like you didn't have to hide your video from somebody in the background.
Right.
And so it was really, we just scrounged a couple $100 together. Holly learned how to edit videos, and then slowly but surely, as we got really good at them and people started noticing them, then we realized, all right, let's up the ante. And so every other month or so, we'll get our videographer out here. His name is Tashawn. He's utterly brilliant. And we usually film in my kitchen, so we don't have like a big fancy studio or anything. And so if you go back on our YouTube channel, it's At Home with House of Puff, you can see the evolution of when we upgraded our videography skills.
I love that. And you mentioned that you and Holly are such data nerds. What were some of the biggest trends of like what you saw in those early days of what was really resonating with folks?
A lot of it was basics, right? The difference between CBN, CBD, THC, the whole sativa, indica, cannabis will it make me anxious? If I don't want to smoke it, how can I cook with it? So things that, people in the cannabis industry might already know, but we weren't trying to speak to those people. We were really trying to speak to people who were, either kind of curious or maybe nervous and just wanted, an elegant, classy way, but like I'm a straight shooter. So I didn't want to muddy the waters with complicated science, and we do a little bit of that, but just really spitting the facts. And so a lot of it was just like back to the basics, like how to clean a one-hitter pipe, and those videos really resonated with our consumer and our fans.
I think sometimes as we spend time in the industry, we forget how we need to always go back to basics. It's like you approach a dispensary and it's like, what product should I get? And it's like, well, did you know that you have this whole endocannabinoid system and your CB1 receptor does this and this terpene does this and blah, blah. And it's
Exactly.
like, oh my gosh, like sometimes we forget because we're so immersed in it that we always have to kind of meet people where they are. And that could be at so many different phases.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. One of our videos is questions to ask when you go to a dispensary, because a lot of the feedback we were getting was, I'm nervous to go. What should I expect? What kind of questions? Because a lot of the times bud tenders will lead you to products they like. And most of the time they are seasoned consumers. So for our audience who are not as seasoned, they have to ask, the basic fundamentals and questions. And so we arm them with those sort of questions.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit. I want to talk about all of your amazing products, but really I'd love to just talk a little bit about the New York market. Tell me about what it's been like to launch there. It's just such a fascinating place. There's so much promise. There were so many delays, but you really made like lemonade out of it, it seems like.
Yeah, we did. I think that, listen, New York was my home for so many years. I knew when New York went adult rec that we wanted to launch a product. We didn't know what product, but we were already in the New York market, whether it was through boutiques or being sold at medical dispensaries. But when the market was wide open and we sort of already had that footprint, it was exciting. Now, it had its challenges, of course. There were delays and lawsuits, but New York is one of the most dynamic and challenging markets in the world. So you have to be able to be nimble, compliant, and really culturally tapped in. But as they say, you can make it here, you make it anywhere. So if you build it here, you can build it anywhere. So my biggest takeaway from being in the New York market for so long is, know your community. I think there are a lot of people coming in from out of state who are really excited about building their brand in New York, and they should. We welcome that. It's competitive, but you really have to know New Yorkers and what they want. And don't try to be everything to everyone, right? So we know that our audience typically are females, although, we're 60-40 now, which is kind of exciting. And so you have to just really stick to like who you are as a brand and how you want to serve your community and really carve out your lane, right? Stay focused, build relationships. Like New York is all about who who works where, who can help you out. And so we have such a beautiful community of people. Like On the Revel, for example, is probably one of my favorite organizations in New York. And they really were the first to bring brands together and license holder and future license holders in one space. And the first year that we participated, you had all of these card licensees, right? The first license that were distributed in New York. And these people were so excited to open up a dispensary in New York. They've waited so long. And we would have never had the opportunity to like really connect with them and network with them. So community in New York is probably my best advice for anybody interested in coming into the market. Because again, it's relationships. It's not just transactions.
Yeah, absolutely. There is such a community feeling about New York in every single way. So it's no surprise that would translate to cannabis as well.
Yeah.
So tell me all about the Spritz, because that is just like the most innovative product. And it's just so outside the box. I just want to hear all about it.
Yeah. So the Spritz actually came about. We had been thinking about it for a while. My co-founder, Holly, She has an autoimmune disease, which, she's talked about on other podcasts, and we talk about it on our YouTube and our blog. And so for her to vape or smoke is really quite difficult for her. She has what we call Victorian throat as well. So anytime she tries to smoke or vape, she's like coughing up like half of her lungs. She's just really sensitive like that. And we knew edibles are great. We'll one day come up with something in that category, but we just wanted to do something that felt really true to us and who we are. And for us, we want cannabis to be accessible like a breath mint, right? But also discreet. I'm a mom, I travel, and so I can't be just like puffing on the train or, doing any of that. So the Spritz came about because of our own need, and we knew we wanted something small. We wanted something that was sublingual, that was fast acting. So the Spritz essentially is, it looks like a little perfume bottle if you've seen it. You spray it under your tongue so it absorbs really quickly. And we made it water soluble, so you feel the effects in minutes. We wanted something low dose. We didn't want to compete with the 20, 30 milligram, 50 milligram gummies. That was not our vibe, and people were doing that way better than we could. We wanted something portable, as I mentioned, something that you could travel with, something you could go out to a restaurant or bar and just like be super discreet about it. Something that obviously didn't require bringing out like a bong or one hitter or rolling a joint. So it was really designed for modern social use, and it's been a game changer for people looking to have more control over their cannabis experience. And when we launched in New York, we did a bunch of pop-ups at some dispensaries, and come to find out that a lot of people, yes, were spraying it under their mouth, but they were also spraying it into their drinks. So a lot, I think cannabis has outpaced alcohol sales for the first time. A lot of consumers are not drinking alcohol anymore. So people were saying, yeah, I sprayed it in my Perrier. And I'm like, that's kind of genius. So we did like Spritz o'clocks, like happy hours. So we would just get a bunch of different, like a mojito that didn't have alcohol in it, but like a flavored drink. And then we would just spray, because our social Spritz, for example, has a mint flavor. So that mimicked the mint in the mojito. And people just loved it. And so instead of taking like a bulky can of, your favorite, weed beverage, you could just pop your little Spritz in your bag, and you're out at a bar and you just spray your water.
That is so incredible too, that it was your consumer base that came up with that new use, and it wasn't the original intent.
Yeah.
It just goes to show that when you think outside the box, it can really take on a life of its own. I think one thing that's also just really interesting is just being an asset light like brand in the cannabis space. Like what has that allowed you to do? Like what kind of flexibility is that giving you? Like I've seen you do certain activations and things like that. What are some of the things you have to do to make sure you succeed in that category?
You have to find the right partners, and that has something. We've had good partners and we've had bad partners, and you have to trust whoever you are licensing your brand to, like they are part of your company, right? And so there are a lot of snake oil salesmen in every state, especially in New York. So you really have to be careful. You have to, there's a lot of sort of compliance and, everything down to packaging. And it really to allow us, especially as a growing brand, to scale. We didn't have to put $10,000 up for packaging, for example. So the brand that we work with now for our pre-rolls, Flower House, it was an amazing opportunity. I think they grow some of the best flower in the state of New York. They really allowed us to do what we do best, which is, do our amazing events, speak to our consumer, do our content marketing. And they really just help grow the brand in New York. And so the pre-rolls are actually based on the Spritz effects, which is amazing. And so, yeah, they took care of packaging. They have an incredible sales team. So it really allowed us as a smaller brand to have that flexibility, but also still maintain control over your brand. Because you can see a lot of brands in cannabis, they think they're signing a good deal. Like, oh, this person's gonna, bring my pre-rolls out into the world and it's gonna be great. And then, the flower's not that good, the packaging is messed up. So really finding the right partner is the most important thing. And we've been lucky with Flower House that we've found a partner that we can trust.
I love that. And I think this kind of creates like an actionable moment, like for someone who's like looking for a partnership, or maybe someone who's thinking about drawing up these kind of contracts. Like, what would be like a handful of things that you would suggest to someone who's embarking on that for the first time?
Hire a lawyer.
Of course.
Really go over it with a fine tooth comb. Really talk to the people that they work with, right? So you have brands that are the license holder, whether it's manufacturing or processing or what have you. Talk to the other brands that they're processing or manufacturing for. Are they happy? What are the pros and cons of working with them? You can grow amazing product, but like, are they nimble? Are they short-staffed? Do they have, the capabilities to be across the state on any day of the week? So we're just really focusing on the work that they've done with other people and using that to sort of do your homework. You just have to do your homework, because especially when you have a brand that's up and coming and that people want to work with you and they see dollar signs, sometimes they can just be, dare I say, a little shady. And, we had one issue with a processor in New York that didn't want to pay us. And so you have to make sure that you're doing business with good people that you trust, and don't rush it, because if you rush it, you're going to miss something. And then you'll be in a situation where you're just losing a lot of money. And it's a competitive space, cannabis in the US, but especially cannabis in New York. So just talk to your community, choose wisely. And just get the dirt, because there's so much dirt on people. You'll always find out something. So always just say, hey, do you know so-and-so? They're doing this and they want to work with me in my company. So it's always good to like do a little background check, if you will.
I like that. Get the dirt. But also, I really like what you said about not rushing it, because this was something I talked about with my last guest. Like, we're just so like adamant about being first to market and getting in there, especially in those early days. And so it seems as though, I've never done a deal like this, but it would be difficult to be like, wait, maybe this isn't right, back up. And maybe that delays the timeline, but it gives you a way better runway and long-term vision.
Exactly. Rather be safe than sorry. So again, just don't rush it because you think you're just going to cash out and make money right off the bat, because it'll just bite you in the ass in the long run.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in terms of how you kind of sustain the brand, tell me about some of the ways in which you market to consumers. Marketing is always just such a fascinating topic for me, because my clients face so many issues all the time, from like social media bans to the different regulations state by state. So what have you really been able to do to like build a footprint in New York? And then I also want to talk about how you're all over the country now with the Spritz too, but specifically in New York, like what are some of the things that you're doing marketing wise to really get your brand out there?
Marketing wise, again, we always stick to what we're really good at. And what we're really good at is just education. And starting with your why, right? Like we're not chasing the trends or the hype. This industry will absolutely burn you out. So you have to really focus. All right, like what are our values? Let's build a community around them. Let's stay focused on the long game. And the space really is about resilience and education, and all that takes time. So really at the core, we are educators that just sell really beautiful products. And so everything from our YouTube to our blog to our newsletter to events. And so we used to do, every year we used to do a High in the Hamptons event at my house in the Hamptons. And it was one of those things where everybody from every sort of corner of the New York cannabis scene was there. I remember one year, it was one of the many lawsuits that was happening. And so I had one of the regulators who was suing one of the people suing the OCM, and one corner, and then you have all the processors, the manufacturers, the brands. But for one night, we all came together. I think it was like, I had to hire security at the last minute. It was like 250 people. And it was just a reminder that, yes, we all have our differences. We're all chasing different goals and have an idea of what the space should look like. But for one night, we all came together and we got to, show people our product, even if they were familiar with the brand, but had never, say, held our rolling tray or smoked out of our one hitter pipe. So I believe, and this is after the pandemic, the face-to-face interactions with our community just became so important. And talking to people like, what do you want to see from us next? Like, what are you up to? Again, it's back to this like community base. If you want to be successful, like tap into your community. And so a lot of our success is doing that and hosting events and getting in front of people in our industry and outside of our industry. So we like to partake in a lot of events outside of cannabis, because we don't want to speak to the cannabis bubble. We want to talk to people who are in entertainment, who are musicians, who are artists, who are in fashion. And so now our new strategy really is looking outside of cannabis events and making our mark there, which has proven to be fantastic, because a lot of the times, especially with women, they're like, I never talked to anybody about my cannabis consumption before. And like, I'm just so excited and I have so many questions. And then of course they become, they become followers, and then they tell their friends. And so it's this really beautiful, organic way to spread and market the House to Puff story.
Yeah. You know what? That is really so powerful, especially because I work in digital marketing, and it's always like, well, what's the cost per click and the CTR and this and this and this. And sometimes you can't like measure that in an in-person conversation, but it can be so much more meaningful and so much more fruitful down the line, because you have those true like followers, people that you've built genuine trust with over the years that are going to kind of evangelize your brand to others. So I think that's phenomenal. So, you talked a lot about House of Puff's values and how you approach the industry, how you approach relationships. I have to imagine by kind of moving into the hemp-derived space that you also kind of had to do that gut check and figure out how you were going to do this. And I've talked to others who have kind of broached both, and they've kind of shared the same thing. So I'd love to just kind of hear from you everything that went into that decision and how you're approaching being in both of those lanes right now in this very murky, muddled time.
Murky with a capital M, I tell you. So we have a saying, make hay while the sun is shining. And so with the Farm Bill and everything going on between the hemp-derived space, we were cautious. I didn't really know much specifically about Delta 9. And I knew that a few of my friends, beverage companies, made the switch over to Delta 9 and were selling it direct to consumer. And I remember hearing that. I'm like, wait, you can buy this online now? And so it took a lot of research, because every state, of course, has its own set of rules, and they're constantly changing. Like, I kid you not, every week we have to pull a state down from our site or put one up. So I think the crossover between hemp-derived and the regular cannabis market is, they're obviously increasingly intertwined, but I think hemp-derived products give brands like ours a national expansion while we navigate all the complexities of like the regulated market. And who doesn't want to be a national brand, right? The fact that we can sell our Spritz, which is of course now available in a Delta 9 formula, we can sell it online direct to consumer through our website, which is incredible. We could also ship it down to stores down there. But you have to make sure that the consumer, and this goes back to education, that they trust. A lot of people still, what is Delta 8? What is Delta 9? And they get very confused because there's just a lot of messaging on the internet and ChatGPT and you name it. So the consumer really has to trust what they're putting into their body. whether it's hemp or cannabis. The product has to be safe, clearly dosed, and in our case, like really thoughtfully designed. So the crossover really gives us an opportunity to, like you said, to meet people where they are, and bring more people into the space. You know, my parts of my family, they're not going into a dispensary, and they live down south, and the fact that they can discreetly order spritz directly from our website and spray it into their drink or spray it before bed is a game changer. Again, it's all still very murky, and we'll see what happens. But it's been an incredibly successful for us in the hemp-derived space, and we'll see what happens. But it's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in Ohio, and there are bills in the legislature right now that are trying to gut the hemp. Well, they're trying to gut the regulated side as well. But it's like you said, it's constantly evolving, always changing. Hard to just plan for what's next and to forecast and those kinds of things. Like, how do you kind of manage that in this environment?
We don't. We're flying by the seat of our pants. And, when it comes to inventory, you never want to run out, but you never also don't want to over order. And so we have a team of people who really just monitor how much we're selling, how much is moving. And especially with tariffs and everything happening in the world, costs are increasingly getting higher. States are changing their laws. So we double down in states that we know are, will always do really well, but also just keeping our eye on the ball. And if forever one day, the hemp-derived Delta-9 goes away, we'll cross that bridge when we get there and pivot. But again, hey, while the sun is shining, and just staying positive and really, I think what we do really well is we just every morning just check the news. What states are like in Ohio, what bills do we think are going to get passed? What bills do we think are not going to get passed? Asking people in those states, hey, what are you hearing? So really staying on top of the news in states that we're selling in has been really crucial for us, and catching the states that are like, sorry, you can't sell Delta-9 in our state anymore, and just pulling it down. Because the last thing you want is to incur a massive fine.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And no one wants to be setting that example.
No.
So absolutely. I'd love to hear from you a little bit about, what the industry still has to understand about women in cannabis. It seems like there was like this increase of women in business in cannabis and like a fall off. And like people think like a women's brand in cannabis is just like all encompassing. But that's why I like bring up Miss Grass, because her brand is so different from your brand. We're not a monolith. These are just things I think about all the time. And I just would love to hear your perspective of like, what do we still need to understand about women in cannabis and how to become, business leaders in this very male dominated space?
Yeah, great question. I love this question. Women are the fastest growing consumers in cannabis. And I think the market still talks to us like an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And as leaders, we're still underrepresented. We're still underfunded, especially as a Latina in this space. I mean, when you talk about like just a VC level, take cannabis out of, for example, I think like Latina founders and companies get like 0.8% of funding from venture capital. Like, it's abysmal. It needs to change. But women want products that fit their lifestyles. For us, we know that they want elegant. They want low dose. Some of them want high dose, but a lot of them want low dose. And they're intuitive, and we need more women at the table to design products like that and shape the industry with intention. And I think, every time I go to a conference and I see, 20% women and 80% men, it grinds my gears. I'm just like, have we not learned anything yet? And one of the best pieces of advice I got years ago when I went to one of the many conferences. I don't know if it was MJ Biz or what have you. And I said to a friend of mine, she's a woman of color, and I said, like, I'm just tired of showing up to these things and, feeling like I'm like the only Latina in the room, or I feel like, there aren't a lot of women at the table. And she said to me, which was so profound, she said, if you stop going and you stop using your voice, they're not going to listen. They're just going to keep doing what they're doing. So even when it's uncomfortable, show up. Even when it's uncomfortable, pull the chair from the table and sit down and make your voice heard. And I thought, she's absolutely right. Why am I going to go back into a corner because I feel like I'm the only woman in the room? If anything, now more than ever, I should start showing up. And so I say anybody who is in the industry or wants to get in the industry, my LinkedIn is open, DM me, because I feel like a lot of us aren't really speaking to each other. And there are great organizations, women organizations in cannabis, but I always, like, when I started in the industry, I didn't really have a lot of women leaders in my life helping, guiding me. And I think we all have to stick together. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so I just really hope that women keep showing up in this industry because we need them more than ever.
I love that you said that. Thank you so much for kind of outlining that for us all. We do need to kind of pull out that chair and just sit down and say, hey,
I'm here.
We do need logos. We can have these things in the regulated market, and there's a huge opportunity. I'll tell you, I've been in this space now. I don't even think I've ever said this out loud, but like, I've been in this space since 2017, and I still feel out of place all the time. I've been in this industry for 8 years, and I still feel weird walking into a dispensary sometimes because I feel like this isn't me. Sometimes I don't see my reflection in this industry, which is just another reason I was so excited to talk to you, because I feel like you probably felt that same way years ago, and you were like, I'm just going to make it.
Yeah. Exactly. You nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, Kristina, what's on the horizon for House of Puff? What are you planning? What should we be excited for?
Yeah. So we obviously still want to expand the Spritz into the Delta 9 market. We really want to target not just dispensaries, but big boutiques. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just walk into like a massive department store and just see a little bottle of Spritz? So we're manifesting that. And, our pre-rolls are doing incredibly well in New York. So we have some potential opportunities to license them in other states, and, continuing to grow our content platforms. We're still trying to figure out TikTok. So if anybody's got any TikTok advice, but I really feel like people are online more than ever. And the stories of gardening, that's the thing on TikTok. Do you garden? I'm like, I love this because we're really getting our message out there. So really just trying to spread the word, deepening our relationships with artists, cultural institutions, especially outside of cannabis, and doing some collaborations that really will tell the story of House of Puff and, how we sit really at the intersection of art, culture, fashion, and all of that good stuff. And yeah, there's a lot more to come. So stay tuned.
Amazing. If people want to get a hold of you or purchase your products, where can we send them?
So houseofpuff.com. On Instagram, we are The House of Puff. TikTok, we're House of Puff. YouTube, At Home with House of Puff. Just Google House of Puff. I'm sure we'll come up. And then feel free. I'm on LinkedIn, Kristina Lopez. Happy to chat with anybody who's interested in learning more about our story and our vision.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your perspective with big ideas in cannabis. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so that wraps episode 8. Thank you all so much for joining us. You can find this episode exclusively on the Beard Bros Media Network, on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you so much. We'll see you next time.